There we are. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the stream. We're also on Facebook Live today. Today, as you can see, I'm a bit of a mess. I've just got out of the shower, apologies. But today, we're going to be talking about a very recent piece of news, and that is that Cakewalk, as a company who make the DAW Sonar, are essentially dead in the water. And we're going to talk about why that might be, and who you can talk to, or company-wise, and what you can use to try and replace it. Because if you've been using Sonar up to now, it will still continue to work as far as I've been made aware. But for how long? There's never going to be a new version. And so, let's start with that. Let's switch over to my other computer. The stream's a little bit late today because just as I was about to come online, my other computer, this one, went and yeah, death and destruction. So, having now restarted it, let's talk about this. So, this is a news article from gearnews.com. RIP Sonar. Gibson, if you didn't know, Gibson, yes, the guitar company Gibson, bought Cakewalk, the DAW company, a few years back. And 2013, that's right. And when they bought it, I think their idea was to try and keep up and be relevant and say like, hey, we're not just a guitar company, we're, you know, because they also own KRK, who make the rockets. They also own a lot of different companies. So I think their idea was to try and integrate that and make Sonar something bigger. And obviously that's not happened, and they've made the decision to just get rid of Sonar entirely. That sucks. I mean, Cakewalk have been making stuff like, the original software was called Cakewalk, but if I remember rightly, that was mostly just MIDI. But they also made Sonar, which was my first DAW. I used Sonar 4 back in 2002, 2003, somewhere around then. Can't remember the exact date, but it was roughly around then. And it was what convinced me to start doing this for a living. And from there, I found some limitations with it. I mean, this was the early 2000s. The hardware was not really keeping up, let's be honest. That wasn't Sonar's fault. But at that time, I then went to a university where they were entirely Cubase based. So that was my career path. And yes, I can see people in the chat mentioning a certain DAW, which I will get to. But we'll get there. We're going to talk about how Sonar's just been canned. And one of the things, well, let's have a look at Gibson's announcement and see how useless this is. I'm going to zoom in a bit so that it's easily readable on stream. So Gibson have said they're ceasing active development and production of Cakewalk branded products. It was made to better align their acquisition strategy, but they already acquired Cakewalk. What do you mean, acquisition strategy? Heavily focused on growth in the global consumer electronics audio business under the Philips brand. Philips make hardware, not software. So what they're saying is they are making a massive loss on the software, or at least not making any profit, and they want to make profit on their hardware. They're dumping Cakewalk because they're not making them any money. And they're not seeing the long term, and they're not keeping them on because they can build that into something that, you know, an entire industry would revolve around. In my opinion, they've not thought this through. Now let's look at the Cakewalk announcement, which is separate from the Gibson announcement, even though it's hosted on the same website. Noel Borthwick, the CTO of Cakewalk, has made this announcement. And at the bottom, they've said, Cakewalk servers will continue to operate, you'll still have access to all your online assets, and your software will continue to work normally. But how long for? Monthly updates to Sonar will cease during this time. So one of the big things that I've heard from Sonar users is there's a monthly update, which means that there's always bug fixes, improvements. They no stop. There's no two ways about it. This is it. It's over. If there are any bugs left, they will never get fixed. If there are any new features in the pipeline, they will never come out. If there was anything that you wish they'd change, it's absolutely awful. Dr. Nightgaunt in the chat just said, isn't Gibson in organisational freefall as it is? Yes, it is. It's, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion, they are absolutely dying of death. They are doing what the record industry did a few years ago and failing to adapt. They have become the dinosaur of the music industry. They're trying to use the old world model of buy all the companies, have all the companies, and not realising that with all the products, if you don't update them properly and care about them all, and someone else, Pigeon Post String Band, Gibson in financial insolvency. They've not declared insolvency yet as far as I'm aware, but from all accounts they are not doing well, to say the least. And that, even with Gibson guitar products, they're bringing out new versions of old guitars that are the same guitars with features that nobody wanted and nobody asked for. It may well be that with Sonar, because hey, I've not used Sonar in years, maybe they're doing things with it that nobody asked for. Now, that's the thing. Let's go back to this article here. So the user base alone, Gear News say, has to be worth something to someone, and hopefully that means the last Cakewalk CDs will come pre-broken. Yes. Hopefully the users of Sonar, when they migrate, and they're going to have to, will eventually migrate towards something that's interesting. Now, here's the thing. What are the options? So, the options, let's just rattle a few off, shall we? There's Pro Tools. There's Cubase. There's Reaper. There's... I'm starting to struggle now because one of them I was going to say was Sonar, but that's obviously not the choice. PreSonus Studio One, I guess? I mean, we're really reaching now. Anybody in the chat want to suggest any others? I mean, not necessarily ones you would use, but just mention to me some of the alternatives there, because, I mean, if you're using Sonar, you're not going to use something like Audacity. That's not going on the list, because Audacity, I mean, it's not useless, but compared to a full-featured DAW, that's not powerful enough. There's Bitwig. Ableton Live, to me, is a completely different beast. To me, Ableton Live is a great program. I do not use it. It doesn't work for me. Reason? It's only recently that Reason even added audio recording as a thing, so I still get a bit twitchy about Reason. I mean, if you're an electronic guy, I can see why you would use it like as a set of external instruments. It seems pretty cool for that. One of the guys in the chat says, yeah, just switch to PreSonus Studio One. I hear it's decent. There's Harrison Mixbus, which is getting a lot of... the community feedback that I've seen is, sounds good, is really awkward to use. It's not quite there in terms of usability yet. Now, I learned on Cubase, and I stuck with Cubase for a while until something better came along, because for me, at the time at least, Pro Tools was out of reach. This was back in 2007, 2008 when I made a switch. Cubase was... at the time, at least, tricky to use. What's the one that comes bundled with Macs? Oh, GarageBand or Logic. I mean, problem with them is they... oh, that's something to talk about, actually. They are OS specific. GarageBand and Logic, you have to have a Mac to use them. And let's not say the word Hackintosh. Let's not bring that into the conversation, because they're not officially supported. So, as a professional, don't do that. As a professional, you need things to be officially supported, so when it goes wrong, you've got someone to call and someone to send it back to. But Sonar was Windows only, which would probably have been one of the biggest reasons why it didn't catch on so well, even if it was a great program, because how many audio guys I see in chats, in comments, saying, you have to use a Mac, it's the most professional thing. I mean, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but that's quite a popular one. It's quite a big belief in the audio world that if you aren't on a Mac, you're not doing it right. Now, I personally disagree with that, but there's a large number of people who, you know, that's their thing. And whether we like it or not, that is their thing. And thousands upon thousands, possibly millions of audio engineers, you're not going to change their mind. So no Mac version, no use. The first thing that Gibson could have done when they bought Cakewalk was make a Mac version of Sonar. That would have really perked people's ears up. Did they do that? No. What else? So yeah, Logic is Mac only, which is one of the big reasons why I don't use it. And Sonar was Windows only. So that whittles it down to really the big three, well, what I now consider to be the big three. Pro Tools, Cubase, Reaper. Now a lot of people still go, Reaper? What's Reaper? And that's where I come in. One of my most popular videos on YouTube is my Reaper DAW 101 tutorial. And that's, I mean, awesome. Thank you to everybody who's watched that and tells everybody else about it, because Reaper is my favourite of the three. Cubase has come a long way. The issues I was having back when I stopped using Cubase, Mixbus, yes, I've mentioned Mixbus now. And yeah, one of the big issues I was having was the way that the engine worked in Cubase. If you went, it kind of went downwards on the page, which meant that you could have, you know, tracks going to a group, and then, but then that was kind of it, which meant that aux mixing, that kind of thing, you know, going to different mix groups was difficult at the time. I believe the entire mix engine has been rewritten since Cubase SX3, so that's now entirely freeform and possible. And fair enough, a lot of guys still use Cubase because they believe it's the easiest to do MIDI editing in. I don't have any problems with using Reaper with MIDI editing, but hey. And then the other one, the obvious one, the elephant in the room, is Pro Tools. Now, Pro Tools, there are several versions. A lot of guys, especially on Mac, still use Pro Tools 10 because that was kind of the last version that used the plugins, the TDM plugins, and kind of there's a brick wall there because they've rewritten the architecture. I still say to people, if you're a Pro Tools fanatic and will not change, get yourself on Pro Tools 12, make the leap, because, you know, the engine should improve and all these things should improve, and with this new plugin format which they made to accommodate the HDX hardware, the AAX should be around for a long time. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of Pro Tools, but for a lot of people, that's their thing. I mean, the old kind of thing about pro studios all use Pro Tools is starting to go away now as well. I mean, 3 or 4 years ago, if you'd said that, that would have been my first concession. Was yes, absolutely. That, you know, yes, Pro Tools was the thing, and Pro Tools HD especially. If you walked into a big recording studio that wasn't recording on tape, it was a Pro Tools HD system. Pro Tools 9, maybe Pro Tools 10, and with an HD 3 card system with 3 cards in there, they were tough to beat because the latency with the monitoring, that didn't have to be direct monitoring, you could have all your effects on there live coming back into the studio, into the control room or into the booth. That was great. Cost was really high, but there was a Pro Tools version, I think it was either LE or M-powered, which was really kneecapped. I mean, there were only so many tracks you could have in it. I think it was like 24 tracks, which for what I do is a massive limitation. I couldn't use a lot of what I do, 24 tracks. I use way more than that, depending on what I'm recording and how I'm doing it. The newer versions, like Pro Tools HD Native, I don't know what the difference is really between HD Native and standard Pro Tools. I think the difference is you can send a Pro Tools HD file to someone with HD and back and forth or something like that. Not really sure. But they're still pretty expensive and they come with hardware. And Pro Tools, the basic version, is still, what, $600? I mean, I know there's a monthly subscription version for it now, but that's still a lot of money. Now, there was a page, let's bring this up, on slant.co. It's a little out of date, granted, but it compares Pro Tools 11 to Sonar. Now, let's have a look at why anyone would have used Sonar over Pro Tools, and then we'll talk about Reaper. So, pros for Pro Tools, very fast precision editing. I'm not sure that that's any... Oh no, that's for Pro Tools. I'm not sure why that would be faster in Pro Tools than Sonar. Mature editing and mixing facilities in Pro Tools. Anyone who uses Pro Tools regularly will tell you how much Pro Tools crashes. And how they're saving regularly, saving backups of everything. Pro, 64-bit. Sonar was 64-bit a long time ago. So I'm not sure how that's a pro. Extremely clean DAW interface in Pro Tools, yeah. Extremely dull. Extremely bland. Pro comes with 8 GB of included sounds and 55 included effects. No one uses most of the effects or the sounds. Free version available. Pro Tools first. Yeah, 4 track inputs and 3 projects. So essentially you can't do anything with it beyond a certain scope. I mean, even when I was a 15-year-old kid learning how to record, I had a 4-track tape machine and that was heavily limiting. Now, if I went to a friend's house and they could record an unlimited amount of tracks for, you know, not very much money at all, I'd be going, I'm going to use that now. Here's some of the interesting things about Sonar. Built-in vocal comping and pitch correction. Vocal comping is something you should be able to do in any DAW really at this point in 2017, 2018 almost. Pitch correction, fair enough. But the inbuilt pitch correction, I mean, it's $99 to $499. Was that included in the $99 version, or was it only included in the $499 version? Because I can tell you, I bought Melodyne recently. Melodyne, which version? Melodyne Assistant. It was about $200, and the DAW I use was $60. So that's still half the price of that top Sonar version. Includes Melodyne Essential via ARA. I'm not entirely sure about ARA, but I just use Melodyne with the standard VST bridging and it works absolutely fine. Includes Addictive Drums too. Yeah, but what if I don't want Addictive Drums too? What if I want to go with BFD or Stephen Slate drums or Superior Drummer, which are kind of the big 3? Integrated drum replacement. I don't really want integrated drum replacement. If I'm going to do sample replacement that is single shot, I'm either going to use something like Slate Trigger because the actual trigger detection method is amazing, or I'm going to tab to transient and do it myself, because then the extra little time it takes, and if you learn how to do that quickly, that's really fast, you save yourself a lot of time with ghost notes that shouldn't be there. You just go, yes, 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 no, yes, yes, no, yes, no, and a human can do that much better than a machine. Having said that, I like things like Drumagog and especially Slate Trigger. So we're getting, you know, very frequent updates. Not anymore. Inexpensive, full version of the DAW. Platinum, something, yeah, none of that counts anymore. Inbuilt bridge, allowing 64-bit software to use a 32-bit plugin. Guess what? You can get a 32-bit to 64-bit VST bridge for free for any DAW as far as I'm aware, and also Reaper comes with that and has done for a long time. A long time. I use Reaper 5 now. I used Reaper 3 way back in 2008 and that could do VST bridging then, and it worked perfectly fine. So, moving on. Cons for Pro Tools, too damn expensive. Now, how much was Pro Tools 11? $700. I know there's a monthly version now, but yeah. No RTAS or VST plugin support at all for Pro Tools 11. I don't know if there's any VST support. You'd probably have to use a bridge for Pro Tools 12. Prone to crashes, yes. The only times I've ever had Reaper crash on me is when I've got a really buggy plugin. So I tend not to use buggy plugins and I look out for updates and update regularly. Aside from that, it's solid as a rock. Con, audio drivers and ACO. You cannot change the audio outs in ACO on the fly. Oh, it's a Pro Tools thing. Without having to save and restart the entire program. Yeah, I've noticed that Pro Tools can be really awkward about things like sample rates and about output numbers, and you have to restart and restart and restart to get everything just right. But I think that covers everything apart from this. Da 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 da. this is Reaper. This is my weapon of choice. Now, it just came up with the ACO for all drivers, which you can have installed for free, which mean that I can use this in low latency without having to plug an interface in. And why would I do that? If I'm away from my desk and I just pull my laptop out, I can just plug my headphones in and hit play and pause and everything and have the machine behave as I would expect. It's kind of a replacement for core audio, really, ACO for all, in the caveat that if your interface has its own drivers with it, you should use them because that's always going to be better. But that's the same on Mac as Windows. So let's talk about Pro Tools. Not Pro Tools. Let's talk about Reaper as, yeah. Latency is not an issue with Reaper at all, I've found, because the latency stuff is generally a combination of how efficient your DAW is and how efficient your drivers are for your interface. And it's a combination of the two. If your interface has terrible latency in the drivers, no DAW on this planet is going to get good latency with it. Conversely, if your DAW has not very good audio compatibility, but say you're using something like an RME interface where they have rock solid low stability drivers, you're still not going to get the latency right down there. That's very early on. Reaper was very heavily optimized for multi-processing. Like, my main desktop's got a 6-core processor, my laptop's got a 4-core 8-thread processor, and if I'm running something like, oh, that's probably not going to work because that's on an external drive which is not plugged in. Oh no, it's not. If I was going to load up something that had a virtual guitar amp on every channel for, say, 10 channels, oh, do you have this iLock? It's in my bag over there. I'm going to grab that just to prove points. Hello. There we are. Goes straight ahead. Never had an issue with iLock with Reaper, ever. And I know that a lot of people, I see them on things like the Slate Audiophiles group on Facebook, having massive issues with iLock. Massive problems. And I've not had any of that. I don't know about you guys, but when I have had issues, there we go. So here's the original pre-mix version. Let's see if this comes up actually. No, thank you. Don't want the sound through the Elgato. Stop. Stop. Mute. There we go. That was annoying. Sorry about that. So that should now... There we go. Yeah, if we look at this window, I'm running an entire massive multi-track drum kit there with everything on separate outs. I'm running virtual guitar amps. I'm running all sorts of stuff on a laptop. And if I look at the performance meter, I'm on a 4-core i7 laptop. A laptop. And with everything going, with that full virtual guitar amps on 4... Oh yeah, the Excalibur demo, by the way, I tracked everything with a virtual amp, and then I went back later and reamped through my real guitar amps, but for the tracking, this is, yeah, 19 to 20% processor usage with thermionic amps with the quality on full through wall of sound on every guitar amp. With everything folded like I used to do in Cubase, so I've got two different microphones. Oh no, I've got a dry and a DI. Yeah, oh yeah, that's right. So the way that I was running it, for the reamp, the DIs are going straight out of channel 5. That's another thing. I've opened this on a completely different machine, and it's kept all of my channel routing. The ACO drivers that I'm using right now only have 2 ins and 2 outs, so obviously nothing on channel 5 is going to go anywhere, but it's saved that there, so that if I hit save on this and go back to the studio machine, which has like 32 outputs, then it will just pick up where it left off. Yeah, Reaper has the easiest learning curve of any DAW. I find that as well, where with Cubase especially, and with Pro Tools as well, you have to add audio tracks, you have to add instrument tracks, you have to add aux tracks, group tracks. That makes it awkward until it's all set up, because you have to think in your mind like an analog mixing desk. Now, personally, I like to think like that anyway. I mix in a kind of analog way where I send things to buses generally. But what if I don't want to? What if I change my mind? And, like, in this case, I have changed my mind. Like, the drum group here, if I solo that, is a folder. And that's something you can do in Cubase. It's something you can do in Reaper. I don't think you can do that in Pro Tools. And instead of sending every drum part to an aux, which is the way that I used to work, and I still sometimes do, I can put everything, I make another track, move these into it, and it's a folder, and suddenly all the audio goes up and out of the folder, and any effects that go on that folder work like a bus, which is very powerful, and means that I can shrink and grow this, and get it out of my way so I'm not sifting through 100 tracks. Yes, it's hard to make a huge mistake in Reaper because everything is quite non-destructive. The undo, if I go to where it says show hide mixer tracks and click that, it gives me a full list of everything I can undo step by step. The way that I have Reaper set, if I go into my preferences and show you this, there's, is it under project? Yes, I have it to save with relative path names. When overwriting the project file, it renames what the project file was and makes it the backup, so that if I accidentally hit save, and I've seen people do this with like Photoshop or whatever, where you go, no, and you've suddenly lost a load of work. It's happened to me too. Instead, I just close Reaper down, go and find that backup file that it made, open that, and everything's there. And also, I also have ticked keep multiple versions, so that backup file is incremental. It keeps, every time I hit save, it makes another backup version. So that if I somehow, say I'm recording an entire album in a project, this is something that's happened to me, where off screen somewhere I've accidentally selected something and hit delete whilst trying to delete something else. And that's then gone out of the project. I hit save, that's gone. If I've got time-stamped backups of everything all in one file, then that means that every time I've got a save, I can just go back and say, okay, well, when do I think that got deleted? Was it 3 o'clock? Was it 1 o'clock? Was it 11 a.m.? And also, I have it to save multiple files every 15 minutes. As well, belt and braces, because what if that backup file gets corrupted? So it saves everything time-stamped. And I can also save an additional project in an additional directory. I might even start doing this, to be honest. I might set this to have a folder in my Dropbox where every 15 minutes it saves a timestamp file of every project that I do, because the actual project file is tiny. It's something like a megabyte, and I have a 1 terabyte Dropbox. So why don't I? I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to go into Dropbox and make a folder called Reaper. Oh, Reap. Oh. That noise is coming from the streaming PC, which also has a copy of my Dropbox on it. And let's just go in that Reap. Save timestamped in additional directory. Now, every 15 minutes when this isn't recording, this is going to save a new copy of any project that I do to my Dropbox. It won't save the audio with it, but here's another thing that you can do with Reaper. I mean, it's very usable. Everything's intuitive, but there are some really clever hidden things that if you ask about, they're all there. One second. I'll reply to that in just a minute. Okay, so back on topic. Somewhere. Oh, chase MIDI note-ons in project playback. I don't know what that means. That seems to be new. Where's the recording options? Ah. Track recording settings. There are defaults for this, but you can have record to audio path, and you can set a secondary place as an invisible backup, so that as you record, say if you've got an external hard drive, you can record a secondary copy of every track to that. You can set this as the default in the preferences, so that if your computer goes bang, or if your hard drive goes bang, every audio file that you've recorded is still kept. Everything's there as a backup. Everything can be backed up and backed up and backed up. I don't know why you'd want to quantize MIDI recording, but if you're insane enough, hey, why not? I'd rather do it in post, but that's also an opportunity. Virtual instruments drop straight in. Reaper, this is the last thing that I'm probably going to talk about tonight, because I don't want to drag this on too much, but Reaper is cheap. Reaper is about $60, if I remember rightly, for a non-commercial license, so that's for you and me. I mean, yes, I do this for a living, and I still qualify for a non-commercial license. I think if I remember rightly, it was some crazy number, like $100,000 a year that you make off it, then you should be paying the $250 for the full license. And if you're at that level, you really should. But I mean, even then, it's compared to something like a Pro Tools HD rig, it's an absolute bargain. So that rounds it out for me. Is if you're jumping from Sonar, and you're going to have to at some point soon. Number 3 is Cubase. Number 2 is Pro Tools. Number 1 for me is Reaper. The other thing is it's being updated regularly. It's not been sold to a major company. It's still run by the people who care about it. It's not open source. And but it is run by a passionate team. If you remember Winamp, the guys that made Winamp are the guys that make Reaper. Winamp was awesome. And in the same token, Reaper is awesome. And it's cross-platform. It works on OS X, it works on Linux, it works on Windows. And you can run all your VSTs with it. You can run audio units through it if you've got them from Logic on a Mac. You can do everything that you can do in any DAW. There is nothing limiting you. If there was anything that was limiting me, I wouldn't be using it. And that's the reason why I didn't use Pro Tools LE or M-Powered, because they were limiting. I didn't use Cubase anymore because it was limiting. That's right, you can even write your own plugins for Reaper. It's not limiting. It's all written, I think it's in Python. You can customize the code if you want to, and they let you. You can have themes, so if you prefer the way Pro Tools looks, you can change everything. You can download the themes from their website. Again, for free. View, is there where? I don't know where I'd find that, because I honestly have never really looked at changing the themes. Yeah, so you can change the way that it looks in a click. Nice and simple. You can change anything about it if there's anything you don't like. There are certain key shortcuts that I wanted that were in Cubase. One of my favourites, I think it was Shift and Z. Shift and Z in Cubase was set the locators left and right to whatever I have selected on screen, and I loved that in Cubase. So I went into Reaper. Actually, I'll quickly show you this. So if I, click on this piece of audio and I want that to be the time selection, say if I want to export that selection, Shift and Z. It's not a button by default, but what I did is I went into the action list, and let's just find it. Find shot, Shift and Z. time selection. Set time selection to items. That wasn't a thing. I made it a thing by adding a shortcut key right there. Another one. I think it's Alt and Z is one that I added. Remove contents of time selection, moving later items. Oh, speaking of plugins, can you recommend a good reverb and delay? Yes, I absolutely swear by, for delay, Soundtoys Echo Boy. It's amazing. It's got some very nice natural sounding tape delays and also some very nice kind of modded and modelled funky delays, like it does a Boss delay pedal, it does an Echoplex really well. And for reverb, Slate's Verb Suite Classics is by far the best virtual reverb I have used to date. It's intuitive, it's easy. I'm not the kind of person that changes all the settings on a reverb unit. The way that I've always worked is I find, like, even on the old outboard gear, I find a nice preset that works for me, because it's the only thing where presets would work. Like, say, an old Lexicon 480, I would go to the A plate or the fat plate, thin plate. And generally speaking, unless there was something very subtle I wanted to change, I would then EQ or compress before and after it with separate plugins or separate hardware. So for me, the Verb Suite Classics can do a Bricasti, which is ultra modern. It can do an old plate. It can do a Lexicon. It can do all those classic sounds. And for me, that's more important than tweakability in that case. I just want my reverb to sound good without me spending hours on it. So there's the two. But they work perfectly well in Reaper. If I just... Oh, here's another thing that saves me a lot of time. See how I've got tons of plugins here? I want to use Verb Suite Classics. I type in filter VERB, verb. And it whittles it down to everything with verb in the name. And there's Verb Suite Classics. So that's got the Lexicon 480 in there. And 224. It's got an EMT 250 plate, the Bricasti M7, like I said. It's got loads of amazing sounds. And it's only got, a few knobs and a low, medium and high. That's all I need. But that works perfectly, as does any VST I've used, in Reaper. And Echo Boy by Soundtoys works perfectly well. They need an iLock, by the way, to run either of those. But if you're serious about audio, I mean, an iLock's a little bit of a pain, but the fact that I can pull that out, take it to the studio, use them right there, and Reaper has zero issues with it, means that that's my kind of weapon of choice, because the sounds I get out of these are worth the inconvenience of the iLock, and Reaper is absolutely fine with all of it. So, there you go. Oh, that dig-a-ding noise was the first 15-minute backup of this project. Anyway, yeah. Some of the guys now in the chat have to go, and me too, because I've got the rest of my work cut out for me. So, thanks for watching. Hope you found this useful. If you are moving from Sonar, do drop a note in the comments. Let me know what you decided to go to. It'll be interesting to see, because a lot of the guys in chat are already avid Reaper users. They are avid users of Reaper, not Avid Reaper. Avid make Pro Tools. Avid the company. Wordplay. Anyway, yes. Thanks all everybody for watching. Time for me to go. And I'll see you guys later on in the week in the next video. So I'm going to be doing more 7-string bass stuff this week. I'm trying to get some strings in at the moment, and that's going to need a video in and of itself, because that's been difficult. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later on. Ta-ta! Thanks for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this, feel free to check out our other videos, as you can find here, or check out our Facebook and Twitter, or our Patreon page, which helps us to make more videos like this. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.